Hello, I'm John Immervar. Today I want to talk to you about Everyone's In, a new approach for online forums developed with my colleague Gene Johnson and offered in association with the National Issues Forums Institute. First, I'm going to walk you through what happens in an Everyone's In forum, so you'll see how it works and how it differs from the traditional NIF forums most of you are familiar with. Then I'll talk about how EI can help overcome some of the challenges of doing online forums in today's distracted and polarized world. We've been testing Everyone's In over the last few years, so we've been able to observe how it works with different groups. So join me in an online forum on elections and voting. As the participants join the Zoom, they'll see this screen. Then, as usual in forums, we ask participants to introduce themselves with a short sentence or two about where they live, what they do, perhaps something about their family or a favorite pastime. In the test forums, the moderators introduce themselves first to give an example of the kind of quick intro we had in mind. Then we will mention the purpose of the forum. Usually we read the slide aloud so that participants can hear and see the message. And notice a difference here. We're using a PowerPoint. The next slide presents the agenda. For the elections and voting issues forum in particular, it may be useful to emphasize that in this forum we'll be discussing the kind of system we want to have, not rehashing what may or may not have happened in past elections. Then another slide for ground rules. This introductory material, previewing the agenda and presenting the ground rules, is a vital part of any NIF forum. At this point, a typical forum asks the respondents to tell a bit about their concerns about the specific issue, in this case, elections and voting. And here's where things start to look different. Rather than asking an open-ended question, which can be intimidating in today's polarized world, we show a list of typical concerns about elections, as you see. Then we present the respondents with an online poll. No fancy technology here. We're just using the poll software built into Zoom. We explain how to vote. Trust me, people love doing this. And just from the questions, the participants are learning something significant. Different sides of a hot political issue, worries about voter suppression and worries about voter fraud are acceptable topics for conversation in this forum. When the poll results come in, they're displayed to the participants. People love this part too. In our example, there's a major divide here between one group that's worried about voter suppression and another worried about fraud. These results help the moderator literally read the room and form a strategy. With a divide like this on a hot political issue, the moderator has to create a safe space for discussion. Here's how the moderator might proceed in this forum, but of course, the strategy might be different in a group where most people agree with each other. The first moderator question might be, would someone who thinks that fraud is a big concern be willing to say more about that? During the pilots, for example, some participants worried about mail-in voting and asked, how could you be sure that the voter is the one completing the ballot? The moderator, of course, listens politely and neutrally, and then asks, would someone who was more concerned about voter suppression be willing to say a bit about that concern? Here someone might mention news stories about people standing in line to vote for hours, especially in minority communities. Then the moderator invites other comments on those issues. Next, the moderator might ask for thoughts from those who chose other options, including something else. But what about the one person who is concerned about extreme candidates? The other people who spoke knew they had some support in the room, but this person is all alone. So the moderator asks, I see only one person chose this option. Would that person be comfortable speaking? And what about the other issue that no one selected? In this case, that too many people don't bother to vote at all. Here, it's the moderator's job to bring this up and get people to think about low turnouts, especially in local elections. As you see, we are using these polls not so much as a way to learn people's views, but more as a way to guide the moderator and stimulate discussion. Now we move to a preview of the three choices we're going to discuss. With this screen up, the moderator makes sure the participants understand the gist of the three approaches before they begin talking about the nitty-gritty of any one of them. Note here a huge difference. No issue guide. Everything the participants need to know is right here in front of them. They're all working from the same information. Now the group will explore in a preliminary way the three approaches, making the point that this is just the beginning of the discussion. Now, a new poll. The purpose of this poll is to have the participants reflect, even if just for a few moments, on their own views before they plunge into a discussion. This also reminds them that we will be discussing all three approaches, and they should keep an open mind. This first poll will be a picture of the forum's starting point. Suppose the poll looks like this, where only a few participants are concerned about fraud. The moderator needs to emphasize that the group will weigh the benefits and drawbacks of all the approaches, and the moderator might emphasize listening respectfully and with an open mind, even if we don't initially agree with a particular point of view. As in traditional NIF forums, the group considers the practical proposals for each choice. Again, a big difference. Most issue guides in the past had 4 or 5 proposals for each approach. Here, there are only 3. We have found that more than 3 proposals is just too much for a 90-minute or even a 2-hour forum. Too often, proposals aren't explored in any depth, and some aren't even discussed. Here, we have yet another poll. The moderator leads the discussion, as we've seen, making sure to cover all 3 proposals and their trade-offs. In the pilot testing, we found there was plenty of time to explore the pros and cons of each of the proposals. Then, the forum would move on to approach 2. We found that we could allow about 15 minutes for the discussion of approach and its proposals, even in a 90-minute forum. Then we move on to approach 3. Now we're going to finish the discussion by looking at all the proposals they have discussed. Here, we use 2 more polls. The first asks the participants to say which of the 9 proposals they find most promising. Here, they're getting an opportunity to express their view again after discussing it and after thinking about other proposals. And they have to choose which ones are most important to them. Then comes a poll of their least favorite proposals. Anyone who's used NIFI's Common Ground for Action online forums will recognize the importance of giving people a second chance to revisit their ideas and think carefully about their own priorities. Then we post a summary. This shows which proposals were most favored and least favored. The most favored are marked in green, the least favored marked in red. And this also stimulates some additional discussion as the participants review the proposals in the light of their earlier conversation. We found that participants often start to modify their proposals. Someone might say, I don't support sending everyone a mail-in ballot because some people don't even intend to vote. But I think everyone who wants a mail-in ballot should be able to get one. No excuse required. Another person might say, I favor voter IDs, but only if it's very easy for someone who doesn't drive to get some sort of ID. Then we go to wrap up the discussion. We found that the PowerPoint and the polls really help us keep on track, and we generally had little trouble going through 3 approaches and all 9 proposals within the 90 minutes, with plenty of time for people to talk. That gives you an overview. Now, let me suggest how this approach might help with some of the challenges we've all seen for online forums. Not everyone is comfortable speaking in groups, but even if a participant never says a word, he or she, through the polls, is in. They've had an input that will shape the discussion to come. These days, it's hard to hold people's attention in Zoom sessions, and those smartphones are distracting us, calling us to multitask. But the polls repeatedly bring people back to the conversation and to the issue at hand. And even if some proposals get more attention than others, the polls ensure that the group covers all the proposals and the participants have a chance to weigh in on all of them. These days, many of us are reluctant to speak about controversial issues with people we don't know, but the polls give a feeling of safety. Everyone sees the group results, but individuals don't have to talk about their views unless they want to. And in the test forums, nearly everyone did speak because they were confident that no one would ridicule or attack them. Also, the moderator gets a preview of where the disagreements are and can encourage people to speak respectfully. We've all seen forums that include some people who really don't want to talk in groups and other people who love talking in groups. Having more structure inhibits the big talkers a bit and encourages the quiet ones. And we all love those printed issue guides, but they're enormously expensive to produce and they're hard to update or localize. And most important, many participants don't read them. In this approach, everyone has the same information. So that's a quick tour. Doing an EI forum isn't that different from a traditional forum, and the polling technology is simple and easy to use. NIFI is offering materials for conducting EI forums on their website. The PowerPoints, polling questions, and tips for using them are all there. Visit www.nifi.org to find out what's available and to learn about upcoming workshops.